So thanks to everyone for joining us today for this virtual Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust meetup. We are going to talk today about stablecoins as a payment rail. This is being hosted by the LFDT Toronto group, and Seal is one of those organizers for the group. So Seal, I will hand it off to you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, David. Thank you everyone for joining us. So stablecoins, they have been transitioning from niche peer-to-peer transactions becoming mainstream tools for B2B and B2C payments. So today, we'll explore how stablecoins can streamline operations by enabling faster and more secure payments, and how they pose a challenge to traditional payment infrastructures. So we're honored to have Rob and Alex with us. So Rob and Alex, can you just briefly give brief introductions about yourselves? Then we can start the presentation. Thank you.
Alex, we can go alphabetical, so feel free to go first.
All right. My name is Alex Gloy. I worked in traditional finance for most of my professional life, mostly in equity trading and sales, and then now I have my own little firm managing some family and friends' money. Got involved in central bank digital currency, and I'm editor at large for the Observer, where I write about financial things. Should I go straight to my presentation, or Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
I can do just a quick intro, just so people can know who they're looking at before we dive deeper. So I'll keep it short. I'm Rob Durscki from the Stellar Foundation, the foundation behind the Stellar blockchain, and similar to Alex, spent most of my career in traditional finance and banking. But the clock is ticking, and at some point I might break even with crypto. But for now, still traditional finance is winning, but not gaining any more years. Well, who knows? But so my specialty is RWA, stablecoins, and regulated assets from Stellar. I lead that vertical here. And happy to be here, share some experiences and potentially Stellar's perspective on stablecoins and payments.
Yep. So we may start the presentation.
Okay, let me share my slides here. Let me know if there are any technical issues. I called my presentation Stablecoins, Money and Mind to make it a little bit more interesting. I think money is a very abstract thing that we deal with it in every day of our lives, but it's sometimes a bit hard to wrap our mind around it. And I want to start with a mind model of you. This is you sitting at your desk, and you think you're pretty much not moving. But if you think about it, we're sitting on a North American plate, and this plate is moving at about 1 inch per year to the west. If you think about where the foundation is, Toronto, it's about 43.7 degrees north, and the circumference at that point makes a full tour around the Earth in 24 hours, which gives you about a speed of 750 miles per hour, which you're absolutely not aware. And from the distance of the Earth to the Sun, you can calculate that we circle around the Sun at 66,666 miles per hour. And when you think about our solar system, 515,000 miles per hour, the galaxy in our local group, another 670,000 miles per hour. We're actually far from being inert in one place. We are rushing through the galaxy, and the crazy thing is you don't even feel anything about this. Money is similarly abstract, and it took me decades to figure out that in our fiat monetary system, you cannot create money without creating an equal amount of debt at the same time. And that has, of course, a lot of implications. First of all, if you want to grow the amount of money outstanding, which is what we usually need for a growing economy, you also need to grow debt. And at the end of last year, the total debt outstanding reached 318 trillion, or more than 300% of world GDP, according to the Institute of International Finance. Now, if you think about it, if you put a 5% interest rate on 300% of GDP, that gives you 15% of GDP that the world economy has to come up each year and increasing just to pay the interest on the debt. So that creates a certain instability in the system that has to be well managed, or the system can get out of hand. Money can be created in various forms. We know, of course, the physical one, the coins and notes. Then we know money in digital form, loans and deposits. That is entirely created by commercial banks, is not created by the central bank. The central bank actually creates only very little of the money in circulation, on 5%. On top of that, you have shadow banks. For example, a company, an in-house bank at a car dealer that finances your car. Then there's offshore money, also called euro dollars. And then finally comes cryptocurrency here as a wrapper for all sorts of coins and tokens. And the further you move away from the original, the OG of money, the gold, the more abstract it becomes and the more potential pitfalls we are facing. I think bank deposits are actually stable coins, because the moment you hand over your cash to the bank, you become an unsecured creditor of the bank. And while cash is public money, bank deposits are private money. They're two entirely different animals. And we only sleep well because we know that within certain limits, we can go to the bank and exchange our private digital money into physical public money. And this fungibility, combined with a certain amount of deposit insurance here in the US, the FDIC, they serve as the peg between those two. But we rarely think about those. It gets even crazier when you think about euro dollars. So these are dollars, or it can be any other currency, that are created by banks outside the domestic area. So mostly in Europe. Euro dollars don't have a central bank, so you could think of them as a decentralized currency. Not having a central bank becomes an issue during a crisis when there's no lender of last resort. Euro dollars are a digital-only currency. It's not fungible into cash. I couldn't believe it myself. I had in Europe a dollar account at a bank, and I wanted to withdraw some dollars for traveling to the US. And the bank said you can't do that. You have to withdraw money from your euro account and exchange it into dollar bills at the teller. And euro dollars are only fungible into onshore dollars if you have a credit line from a US bank. The size of euro dollars at 50 trillion plus is more than 3 times the size of all US bank deposits. So it's huge. And most of international finance gets transacted through euro dollars. It is interesting that China recently issued US dollar denominated government bonds at par with what the Treasury pays. And these bonds were booked in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So if you buy the bonds, you have to send dollars to a bank in Riyadh. And so these are dollars that are entirely outside of the US banking system and potentially outside of the reach of any sanctions by the US Treasury. So the dollar is not even anymore a currency of the United States. It's a global currency. Another thing I wanted to bring across is when we transfer money, let's say I have an account at Citibank and I want to send some money to a friend who's with Chase. We think of the money gets sent through a wire between the banks, but that's actually not the case. There's no money that changes, that moves from one bank to the other. Instead, Citi has an account with the central bank, the Federal Reserve in our case, and so is Chase. And the central bank simply adjusts the ledger that it has for the deposits of both Citi and Chase. It takes 100 away from Citi's deposits and credits it to Chase. These banks individually, of course, have their customer accounts where they replicate these changes. But what we are basically doing in national wire transfers is just pushing around central bank reserves or commercial bank deposits at the central bank, how they are called, all day long. That's how our economy runs. The advantage of using the system is that central bank reserves are public money without counterparty risk. And the US banks currently have 3 trillion on deposit at the Federal Reserve that can be used for daily transactions. And the amount of daily transaction and the volume is quite impressive. It's 4 trillion a day via Fedwire, the real-time gross settlement systems similar to Links in Canada. And for smaller payments that are less urgent, there's the ACH, the automated clearinghouse, similar to the EFT in Canada. So basically, we transact 1 times the entire GDP every week, and the Eurozone has a similar number. So if you want to build a payment system, it needs to withstand and be able to process enormous amounts of money in very short notices. There are only some P2P payment systems, and I just want to mention 2, like Zelly, real-time internal ledger of member banks. If it's not a member bank, then they use ACH. And even Venmo, which is owned by PayPal, uses ACH or some instant debit rails via one of the credit card organizations. So they still use the existing banking rails for payments. This is just a snapshot of the Canadian payment landscape. The volume you see, more than 50% are credit and debit cards by volume. These are, of course, the everyday purchases at retail outlets, and by value, it's the electronic bank transfers. Now, stablecoins, of course, have advantages versus legacy systems, and one is they can be global. They can be 24/7, 365. They have no closed banks over the weekend. They are programmable. You get settlement finality. In a bank, there is a chance that your transaction might still be reversed, which could be a feature, could be a bug. Stablecoins can have an open infrastructure, and they are FX friendly, meaning that I believe 70% of all Bitcoin transactions, the currency pair is Tether, because Tether is much easier to handle for people who trade a lot of crypto. But public money has its advantages, and for the moment, cash is the only way for individuals to access public money. And as we use less and less cash in everyday transactions, we are losing this access to public money. And that's why central banks have this idea of bringing a digital form of public money to citizens. It gets a lot of flack here in the US, and there are bills in the making that want to outlaw CBDCs. So for the moment, it looks like they're on ice, but Europe and many other jurisdictions are definitely going to go ahead. But the central bank is very important as a lender of last resort. For example, when you had 2 years ago, Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt in the US. It was the 16th largest bank, had at its peak 375 billion of customer funds, of which only 2.7% were insured, because it was often large accounts with balances way above the 250,000 federal insurance deposit insurance companies limit. And within a few hours, 40 billion left the bank in an electronic bank run. And the Federal Reserve stepped in. They lent 126 billion in a few days to SVB, and 100 billion to First Republic, and Signature Bank, some 50 billion. And then the banks were put in receivership. The FDIC took over, and they were put into liquidation without any customer losing a dollar, and without any taxpayer money being used. But you can, of course, only do that if you have a lender of last resort. And so I see some risk for stablecoins. There's obviously collateral. So if you buy treasury bonds, they could fall in value. You could have deposits at private institutions. There you have counterparty risk. If the stablecoin issuer buys assets, there's price and liquidity risk. There's also a run risk. For example, during the great financial crisis, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and they had issued some commercial paper, and this commercial paper was inside a money market fund called the Reserve Primary Fund. Actually, the oldest money market fund in the US was set up in the 1970s. And they had just a bit more than 1% of the assets was in Lehman paper, but there was a run on this money market fund. And at the end, the last bag holders were left with mostly Lehman paper, and then, of course, lost a lot of money. Compliance can be an issue if there's insufficient know your customer, insufficient anti-money laundering. There could be sanctions, or the stablecoin issuer could lose their banking relationship. And one note on tokenized deposits, I believe, but I'm not sure about this. I believe once you transfer a tokenized deposit, it should be burned, because if you don't, and these tokenized deposits remain alive, and keep swirling around in the payment system, you could have, I don't know if fungibility would still be guaranteed, because you could have a tokenized deposits from Bank Bogos in Fiji Islands, and suddenly through transaction you end up with them, but you don't know if this bank is actually good for these tokens or not. So finally, this cartoon here, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. But I would change it into, for a beautiful moment in time, our money was wrapped in a blockchain. And so I would just be very careful with what financial innovations we put on track, and always make sure that there's some counterparty that has unlimited power to be the lender of last resort, because otherwise you introduce potential instability in the system, and a lot of people could end up losing a lot of money. That finishes my presentation. You find me on Twitter, and I write for fairobserver.com, a nonprofit publication.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex, for your insights. Now let's have Rob for his presentation.
Yeah, it's a tough cookie to segue, Alex, after this great presentation. So just a few spoilers. I'm not going to go into astronomy or psychology or accounting, but I did love the end of the world analogy in the end. And I hope that's not where we're heading. But I think part of this meeting is to try to share some of the risks and lessons learned that we had so far with, I don't know, let's say roughly 8-9 years of runway for stable coins. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Okay. Are we all seeing my full screen presentation?
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so this presentation has a bit of institutional bits and pieces here, but my goal is not to sell Stellar, it's just you guys understand what's the context which I'm surfing for the past 5 years. Before joining Stellar 4 years and a bit ago, I actually was running a company in Canada that some of you might know, which is Stablecorp, which runs a Canadian dollar stablecoin backed by 3iQ, Coinbase, Circle, Stellar, and a few others, and at some point moved to the Stellar side. So yeah, I think that context is important, but I was exposed to other layer ones while running that company. Yeah, so Stellar, again, just laying the leveling the ground here. It's a layer one blockchain, maybe one of the oldest ones around. So Alex, an OG, not as much as gold, but on this industry for sure. We've I think come right after Ripple. And this illustration on this website, on this page, is just to give a sense of our footprint. So, the advantage of being an OG is the fact that we've been early on connecting the dots and getting institutions to build and connect with Stellar. So that's just the kind of the bigger on-off ramps, or as we call anchors on Stellar. And actually Stablecorp, which is the company I used to work at, is here in Canada. MoneyGram is kind of laid out down there because MoneyGram kind of covers 180 countries, right? And enable on-off ramp only to USDC on Stellar. Many of these other players here allow on-off ramp into other assets on Stellar that are not stable coins. And the reason I kind of open with this illustration is to give this sense that it's not only about the blockchain itself or the stablecoin itself, but actually how easily can you convert that asset into cash, right? And that's kind of what this illustration brings about, because those players are connecting stable coins on Stellar to bank rails, debit cards, and in the case of MoneyGram, actual physical cash. You can go in any Walgreens or CVS in the US and any MoneyGram mom and pop store in Canada and just withdraw your USDC or deposit Canadian dollars and get USDC on a wallet, right? So Stellar is this kind of OG layer one blockchain. Here's some numbers about Stellar. The one I'm mostly proud, we usually don't talk about because most people at the foundation are not bankers like myself, but we are above the 5 nines of the Six Sigma uptime standard. So we've been live for over 10 years with a 47-minute downtime, which no transaction was lost, which I think is pretty relevant if compared to other players in this industry. Uptime might not be relevant for some use cases like, meme coins, NFTs, and things like that. But when you think about stable coins, B2B and regulated assets, uptime is a very important component, right? So just some high level numbers there. We're actually above 10 million users at this point. Volume reaching 32 billion overall. And I think the most important number here is the RWA supply, which is a mix of securities and stablecoins, reaching almost 1 billion on Stellar. So number 2 after Ethereum. And this deck will be shared later. There's some information about our consensus protocol, which I think is one of the components that makes Stellar appealing to regulated entities, which is the fact that we are not subject to OFAC sanctions because we're not proof of stake or proof of work. So nodes don't make money out of running Stellar. For regulated assets, which stable coins fall under, and internally we try to break regulated assets into 3 big buckets just for the sake of simplifying communication. So payment assets, which is mostly what Alex covered. So central bank money, private money, in the blockchain world, tokenized deposits, stable coins, and CBDC, and it's in synthetic CBDC. So that's the payment vertical. Then securities and the derivatives vertical, which I think mostly has been money market fund getting traction on the blockchain world, and commodities, right? Commodities, especially the ones that are hyper liquid, like gold. But so all those 3 verticals are the ones that me and my team tackle within Stellar, and that we call regulated assets. And I think one of the values that Stellar offers is that there's a bunch of controls and limits that you can set up on Stellar natively versus smart contract based, which we do support smart contracts and very enthusiastic of programmability, but on the asset itself, we're not a big fan of making an asset a contract. We think an asset should be a primitive because that gives you a lot more control based on the protocol itself and also much more efficiency, right? So we're talking about any transfer of any size of USDC or Franklin Templeton Benji or EURC or I can name many stablecoins here, settling between 2.5 to 5 seconds on Stellar at a cost of 1/1000 of a dollar. And that's because all of that runs as a primitive. So for the protocol, it doesn't make a lot of difference if you're moving dollars, securities, or XLM compared to Ethereum, where an asset would be a EVM solidity contract versus a native asset, and all those controls that many of the central banks and security regulators expect are native on Stellar. So whitelist, blacklist, freezing, clawbacking, which helps a lot on the getting those assets approved and adopted in more kind of a mainstream fashion. There's more data here about performance and costs, which puts us, and this is third-party data about our kind of how competitive we are in that sense. Here are some names that are live on Stellar on the stablecoin side. So Circle is our biggest partner. We have some big payment partners as well, which offers either the last mile or the wallet. So Stripe and MoneyGram being the 2 biggest. AirTM growing a lot with aid disbursements in Colombia and other countries and acting as a P2P and foreign exchange means. And on the bottom, I added some just icons of other big assets on Stellar. So Stasis, EuroS, I think until recently was number 1 in circulating supply of Euro stablecoins, now surpassed by the Tether one, which probably is going to run dry because of the MiCA regulation. GMO, which is a Japanese conglomerate issuing Japanese yen and dollar on Stellar. Societe Generale Euro, which is that one before the last logo, the circle euro, and as I mentioned, stable corps Canadian dollar as well. On the security side, Franklin Templeton, Wisdom Tree, and Paxos are the three biggest issuing money market funds on Stellar. Ondo just confirmed that I think around June they're going to issue their USDY, which is the permissionless money market fund backed asset on Stellar as well. Let me move forward to potentially my insights about stablecoins, because I think you guys can potentially dig this online or just on the presentation later. But I wanted to share a bit more about kind of my thoughts and to a certain extent Stellar's thoughts and learnings about stablecoins. So I broke this down between B2B and retail use cases. So on the B2B side, I think this is kind of a segue to Alex insight, but maybe lesser on the risk and more on the growth angle here. So when I started working with stablecoins, I remember doing weekly reports to the shareholders of stable corps about the progress of the stable coins globally, right? And I remember when we reached $500 million in total supply, there was kind of this breakthrough moment, right? And we're at 200 billion 5 years later now. So that is what is that? 400 times growth in supply in 5 years. So we've gone from millions to billions. Now it's time to go from billions to trillions. And I think if mainstream financial service is the target, and I think it should be, there's some homework to be done to kind of break that barrier, right, of becoming indeed a mainstream payment asset compared to credit cards or SWIFT or bank deposits, right? So on-chain cash, which I'm referring to here as an abstraction of stablecoin, because you can think of CBDCs if they ever pick up or tokenized deposit as also an on-chain cash. As it stands today is ready to use, right? It's 24/7, it's instant settlement and globally available. If you think of any alternatives to try to bring those features to a new product, which is not public blockchain based, I just think it would be very challenging. And to be fair, I think industries and regulators have been trying to do that for decades, right? Like just trying to create a real-time settlement layer cross-border with a fiat denomination is a insane burden. And some of the reasons are the ones I put there. So agreeing on standards, right? So meaning I think the current moment of the United States shows the challenges of agreeing on anything, and imagine agreeing on payment standards. Maybe ISO 222 is a good attempt, but I went deeper into the trenches to see how banks are, how far they are on the adoption of that, and it's not very good looking. And other key tasks on adopting an international standard. So the maintenance, how do we trust the counterparts? So my analogy when I think about stablecoins is that central banks and to a certain extent private banks have been working on trying to modernize global payment rails for years now, and maybe didn't look or didn't notice that some developers and non-financial people were building a highway in parallel connecting many countries. And when they realized that thing was live and running, right, and there's much less restriction on which cars can ride on that highway and how many countries are connected with that highway. So I like to use that analogy more in the sense of saying it is ready, right? Of course, there's a debate on which assets to use and what kind of regulations need to be designed. But from a technological standpoint, 200 billion is a good proof that this works. So I think looking at the future, I think stablecoins are here to stay. They are growing, but they on their own are not the big breakthrough. I think it's the use case that they enable, and that would likely require stablecoins to interact with other assets, right? And not only Bitcoin, to Alex's point, which I think it's an important one, where in the beginning, buying a Bitcoin would probably involve a couple of pizzas or whatever else you were trading against. Of course, now stablecoins became the mainstream for buying native and utility tokens. But if you think about securities, with all the challenges of time zones and 9 to 5 restrictions, I think that's a big part where stablecoins are gonna grow. This idea that you're going to use stablecoins to buy and sell securities in 24/7 fashion. And DeFi, right? And DeFi is one of those tricky terms because it can mean different things to different people. Same with Web3. But my understanding of DeFi is basically having trading venues on chain, right? So that's the only thing I kind of try to think when I say DeFi. And the idea is that you have traditional trading venues, broker dealers, stock exchanges, banks, and you would have, smart contract protocol based trading venues. And I think the key difference here is availability, right? Like I'm not debating if one is safer than the other, liquidity and all things that I think should be debated. I'm thinking about availability in the sense that as someone who came from Latin America to Canada, I struggle with, are the banks open? Can I do this today? Is it a holiday in Latin America? Is it a holiday in Canada? So DeFi, you can just theoretically go from dollar to an S&P 500 or a money market fund on Stellar 24/7, right? So I think that's where a lot of the growth is likely going to come. The idea that stablecoin become the key means of payment, of getting in and getting out of investments, either directly through the RWA issuers, for example, BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, WisdomTree, Robinhood, or through DeFi, which is more of a secondary market play, right? The other, and I'm on the second to last here bullet. Another use case that we've been discussing a lot at Stellar is B2B payments and multinationals that struggle. Well, struggle might be a strong word. They've been doing quite well, and to Alex's last image, paying back to the shareholders, but they have to coordinate treasury, right? Like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and sometimes they have a Singaporean operation, a New York operation, and if they have idle cash somewhere and they want to park somewhere else, they just lose a day or two, which, in the bottom line, that's a lot of money if you think about multinational treasuries. So I think the idea of enabling what we're calling smart treasury or smart collateral is something that is going to lock a lot of funds globally, right? Because we're talking about companies like Apple, you name it, companies that are holding hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars on their treasury, and still limited with fairly like old technology to move that capital around, right? And I highlighted collateral management as the last bullet for B2B because that is kind of a subset of use case on the corporate world, which is not very transparent to everyday people, you and I, but a lot of companies need to lock cash to get access to some of the services that they use or offer to their clients. And even locking the cash is challenging. So if you're a bank in Brazil, where I come from, and you want to issue a credit card, you have to lock collateral at JP Morgan or a few other banks to issue one of the two big brands, right? To move that money, it has to be Monday to Friday. It has to be on a certain branch, on a certain amount, through a fairly challenging KYC process. So that on its own makes the process of offering better payment solutions challenging to the company behind it, right? So the idea now that some trading venues and credit venues are accepting stable coins, or more specifically tokenized money market funds as collateral, just make that much simpler from an enterprise perspective. So yeah, so I'll wrap it this from a B2B perspective. Still, how are we on time? I think it was supposed to be 20 minutes each and then open for questions. Did I get that right? And we're 20 to go.
We still have time. If do you still have something to present, Rob?
Yeah, I have. I just wanted to kind of do a checkpoint here.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, my other slide is same way, but talking about the B2C and the kind of P2P, which could be like C2C, if you're assuming those are consumer to consumer transaction, right? So I think the trends on the retail side are non-custodial wallets and on-chain foreign exchange. I myself personally use on-chain FX to move dollars to Canada, American dollars to Canadian dollars, and vice versa. I get a good price with some market makers in Canada, and the beauty that it's real time, it's good, right? So that's one thing I do on my own. But of course, there's still a lot to be done for that to be minimally competitive with mainstream solutions, right? And I would say that the key bottleneck is liquidity. So Of course, we can go back to, oh, is USDC safe enough? Is I don't know, we can get other assets. USDT safe enough? Maybe that's a judgment for each individual to make and depends on your exposure, especially if it's a short term, small ticket, you might not care that much. But the liquidity becomes a bottleneck regardless if the asset is trustworthy or not, because then you can say, okay, I want to send $100,000 to Canada, and you find out that above 50K, there's a slippage of 5% or whatever. So then you said, you know what, I'll go back to HSBC or Citi or RBC and do it there and pay whatever fees they're charging me. So I think that's still a long way to go, or yeah, there's a way to go on the traditional finance players bringing their capital and providing liquidity. And I think there is a technology piece here where we need to aggregate liquidity, because if every pool requires capital separately, then makes capital very inefficient for that. The other use case we're working on is aid. So Stellar is partnered with the United Nations, Mercy Corps, the International Refugee Committee, and I don't want to make a big sale out of that, but something that makes us very proud, as resonates to our mission of financial inclusion and just doing good, because it's a nonprofit organization. And I think here the change is significant, because this is building stuff for people who don't want to build stuff, right? Like when you're providing wallets, ramps, and payments assets in Syria, Lebanon, Ukraine, you're building stuff where people at this point are not building stuff for many reasons, right? One of them, even regulatory concerns. So I think that is a place where blockchain thrives, because the technology is less blockable or censored from whatever power is in place. So at Ukraine now, I think we're reaching 30,000 payments, and I don't know how many beneficiaries, but probably reaching the hundreds of thousands of individuals that are cleared by the United Nations as refugee. They have their own refugee ID to KYC those people as eligible to aid. But the whole process of going from a donor wholesale wallet in New York holding hundreds of millions of dollars in USDC to the end user cashing out hryvnia in a store in Lviv or Kiev, it's done in a few minutes on Stellar, right? From the KYC, the digital identity, sending an SMS, downloading the wallet on a simple phone, because it's a very simple app that doesn't require a modern phone. You get your USDC, and it's up to the end user if they want to convert the full amount into hryvnia and cash it out, or keep it in dollars to protect from inflation or devaluation. So I think aid is going to be another big one for retail. And when you think about emerging markets that are not in any contagious situation of war or whatever, but just have a more volatile economy, then I think offering tier one assets to retail users is just a smart move. Like if you think about Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, you have a fairly big high net worth community that doesn't have good access to quality assets, at least not denominated in dollars or euros or other tier one currencies. And that can be done quite easily using stable coins and non-custodial wallets, right? So you could think, simply inflation hedging, but also if you move to the security side, some sort of wealth preservation. And then stable coins, again, play a big role here. They can be the end goal, where in some cases, for example, in Argentina, holding USDC on its own already feels like an investment, because you're circumventing the dollar purchase limits that the government put on you and the inflation on peso. But in countries where there's not that much pressure, like Brazil, for example, you would still be willing to hold a 5% a year money market fund in dollar versus a 10-12% year yield a treasury bill in Brazilian reais, because of the volatility of the currency if you're exposed to liabilities in other currencies, right? And my last note is this is kind of the vision, right? Coming from banks and having works with credit cards as well, I think the cards plus bank plus stable coins is where we're heading to, right? Like ideally this seamless cash version conversion that is use case driven. So you just have a balance and it will be converted to whatever rail it's needed to fulfill your use case, right? So I think we're getting that there with some banks that are trying to make this dollar abstraction a reality. and you wouldn't necessarily need to know. You should be able to know if you want to, if you're holding a bank deposit, which is a fractional reserve asset, or if you're holding a stable coin, which is a private reserve asset, or any variations, for example, a CBDC, right? So I think that's more on the longer run. But if we think about user experience and just making this convenient, that's where we see things going. I took notes here on other topics that are important, but I want to leave time for questions related on the work and also the lessons we learned about stablecoin transparency, auditability, quality standards. So there are dozens of stablecoins on Stellar, but the ones that the foundation engage are the ones that fulfill a few requirements on our side regarding risk mitigation and quality. And I think there is still a big path to go on this idea of kind of how fungible stable coins are, right? In the sense of, are they really being accepted one-to-one as a payment asset globally, right? And that would a lot of that go through the process of banks getting more comfortable with holding and using stable coins and the impact that has on their balance sheets and capital requirements, which I think it's starting to progress now in the US with the new administration, and in Europe, kind of with MiCA. I don't know exactly what the accounting implications are, but the regulatory side is moving nicely. So I'll wrap here. I actually, on top of my email, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much, guys, for the invitation and the opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. So we're now open for questions. So anyone from our audience, if you have any questions, Rob or Alex. There's one question on the chat, Rob. So someone's asking, what's the average spread to convert USDT?
Yeah, I used USDC. Last time I used, I think it was 40 bips up to a certain ticket size for retail users. That's using Grapes, which is the wallet run by Stablecorp. So yeah, this is my personal experience. I'm not meaning promoting the products of the company in any way, but I've been using it for tickets of 6 digits and getting something on the 40 bips. Yeah, around that.
Okay. Yeah, hope that answers Brandon. Okay. So are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was just curious. I wanted to ask Rob or Alex what their position is on privacy stablecoins, on those that are not quite existing yet, but as an abstraction of our identity being sold, and what happens with data brokers and all this stuff. How do we stay afloat, even just a business trying not to lose their customers to another business, on an open ledger? How would that go? How do we maintain confidentiality in an open fashion? It's kind of a paradox, right?
Alex, you want to take that? I have an initial position of Stellar, but we don't have a solid position on that yet.
No, I prefer you go ahead. You know probably more about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if no is a good definition. I've just been in a few conversations about that, both with regulators and banks, and I think it's Ez or Ezzy who asked that question.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, thank you.
Easy. Sorry, there you go. Easy. I think our position so far is that it's not clear what the demand is from a product feature perspective. We, as a protocol, would be happy to enable that, but my answer to you is that I got very different and conflicting requirements from central banks and private banks on that topic alone. So we don't really know what private requirements are actually being asked. The only thing that we're discussing, and I think Solana is working on that as well through PYUST and Token 2022, is the anonymization of the amounts of transfers. So even though it is pseudo anonymous through the public key, you would see from and to, but you would not see the amount. But I had the same central bank, a big central bank, telling us that they want anonymity, but they want the capability to prevent money laundering. So I said, like, you tell me how to do that, because so my point at this point is that there's no consensus on what is expected. I think with smart contract-based assets or ZK proofs or even mixers, you can do that. I just don't know if the trade-off is positive. I myself don't care using stable coins heavily as an individual and getting the amounts being seen on chain, because I think it's very hard to track back my public key. But also, I don't matter, right? Like maybe a whale should be more concerned about that.
Yeah, Rob, just a quick question as a follow-up. Would you be interested in scheduling a Zoom or something to talk about this in further detail and actionable steps, or that's not a priority of the Stellar Foundation?
It is a priority, but not to me. So I might connect you to the right person. I had a meeting with our chief product about that recently, because he was on the same boat, as he's been engaging with other players that haven't been able to give him clear scope. So maybe I can connect the dots there.
Thank you very much. I'll send you my information in a private message.
Okay, next, Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks, Seal. Hey, Rob, great job, great presentation. Just a question around the stablecoin. So you've got USDC on Stellar. Is there any thoughts, or maybe is the Stellar Foundation thinking of launching their own stablecoin, or is there a kind of a protocol kind of specific stablecoin that's been there? And the reason why I'm asking all this just because I'm interested, because other protocols do have that or are planning on doing that. And it obviously just helps mitigate against the centralization of USDC and its dominance. So just would love to hear your comments on that. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. The answer is no. Maybe no for now, but it's been no for a while. The institutional position on that is that we don't want to compete with the ecosystem. We work very hard to create, I think, kind of an equitable access to technology to different issuers. The fact that Circle and Tether were the ones that got more traction, I think, is to their credit. But what I can say is that we've been helping with technology, marketing, and grants issuers from north and south, different countries, different natures of entities. And I think it's hopefully up to the market to get a little bit more balance between who the players are. So on the grounds of not competing with the ecosystem, we don't plan to provide any for-profit and consumer services anytime soon. We want to actually help minimize oligopoly or monopoly in any way, shape, or form by being as decentralized as we can.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. Appreciate it. Okay.
Next, Matt.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my camera maybe. Yeah, great presentation, both of you guys. Thank you very much. I would like to know your take about cross-chain transactions and potentially multi-chain. We have a lot of chains going on, blockchains that everybody's claimed to be the best, Solana, Ethereum. I'd like to know if you guys are working on that at Stellar. Is it something that makes sense for you guys at the moment? Thank you.
Sure. Meaning, back to my previous question, I don't think it's up to us necessarily to say if it makes sense or not. We're trying to read the market. We think that multi-chain is a kind of obvious path. If you're building a for-profit product, then you want to reach as many clients as you can. So that's what you see happening with security issuance. And I think Biddle just issued on another chain recently. And even the ones that started with Stellar only are now multi-chain. So I think that's just a natural progression of business in general. On our end, we're working with many interoperability standards. There's the SODA group, there's the RWA.XYZ group, there's the Stablecoin Standard group, there's the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance group. We're a member of all of those. At this point, I haven't seen a strong materialization of what a standard would be. Even Swift is trying. And so we have something that is off the ground now, which is the Hyperledger Cacti connector to Stellar. And I think there's one or two products already live with partners using that to do the bridge between Hyperledger, Bezu, and Stellar. I think one way to answer that question and wrap it up is that anytime we engage with a partner today, we never pitch exclusivity and we never pitch it's Stellar or nothing. We always say this is what Stellar is good for, or at least what we think we're good for, and we're happy to indulge any cross-chain use case, including, for example, to use MoneyGram as an on-off ramp. So there are non-custodial wallets that convert to USDC from Solana and other layer ones to Stellar to be able to use our on-off ramps with MoneyGram, for example.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next, Harold.
Hello, I am Harold Curvell. I'm a professor at the University of the Potomac. Currently, we're working on a project where we're trying to increase the utility of cryptocurrencies through integration with other types of industries. Is there somebody that we can talk with who can perhaps join us in a focus group on such topics?
I'm not sure if that's a question for me, Alex, or CL.
Focus group, meaning a focus group made of consumers.
It's going to be of a combination of students and industry professionals. So it could be with, let's say, mapping professionals and also certainly blockchain professionals as well. We'd like to see if we can find development paths in integrating both technologies.
I might have a name for you if you want to throw your contact me or throw your email on the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So, any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, so there's a question about Ubix. I know Tony quite well, met him last week. I think Ubix is a great project. So the idea of Ubix is creating a centralized clearinghouse for stablecoins. It's just there's a lot of steps that he needs to get through to get that done, including convincing banks, stablecoin issuers, and protocols to all work together. So kind of ties back to what I mentioned as the challenge of getting folks to agree on stuff. But I think that's a great value proposition. And I hope there are many Ubix out there because ultimately just a couple are going to succeed and we're all going to benefit from that. Swift could be a Ubix.
Okay. So, any more questions from the audience? You have any? No more questions? Yeah. Oh, I do have like a question for like Rob or Alex. Just like to like get insights from you. Because like for let's say like real-time payments, usually like they have in place for fraud protection, like they have this like tools, like they use AI transaction monitoring and everything to prevent this like on the side of stablecoin, since like it's on blockchain. Like how is it like handled like right now, or like are there like any in the roadmap like to incorporate this, and like how would it be, right? Like because like there will be some like trade-offs for like instantaneous payments if we'll have some fraud protection added into it. Yeah, so like just like to get like insights from you guys, like any like technological advancements or like or collaboration for infrastructure to have this.
Yeah, I mean, on our side, this would be probably a topic for a whole 1 hour conversation, but I'm a strong advocate that I think the way that public chains are set up, it actually gives you more chance to prevent fraud than on a closed loop non-transparent system. The instant finality, to Alex's point, might be the tricky part of the reversibility of transactions. But if you're working with regulated issuers like Circle, even Tether, those all can freeze, clawback, and unilaterally burn assets if it was subject of a fraud process. We work with Blockade and others. So for those out there that want to try out Stellar, if you use Lobster, Vibrant, or the Stellar Expert, which is our blockchain explorer, you're going to see there's a bunch of automatic flagging of suspicious and malicious accounts, as well as clone assets. So if you're, for example, looking at Franklin Templeton asset and you, for whatever reason, click on the wrong asset, there's going to be a big disclaimer that it's flagged as a clone or a suspicious asset, and that database is available through open-end APIs to any wallet built on Stellar. And Blockade is a third party working on that as well. So anyways, the ecosystem is still sorting that out, but I think there's a lot of technology available. We have a whole stack on KYC, and a bunch of regulated assets use our stack to enable PII to flow securely. So the actual personal data don't flow on chain, but you use private keys to authenticate those KYC transactions. So yeah, as I told you, maybe subject to a separate conversation, but there's a lot of tech and I think a lot of potential for public money to be on public chains.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Okay. Is it Simon?
Simon, Shimon, both are okay. So during the last conference I was participating in, there were some controversies I would like to ask you about. So are traditional institutions or even governments lobbying to delay changes that stablecoins enable? They are using their position to retain as many provisions in the regulation as possible that are beneficial for those companies or banks or governments. What I am referring to is the controversy regarding MiCA, and that those consultations were based mostly with large companies. I know it's a bit political.
Alex, do you have a take? I've been talking a lot.
I mean, I also to the previous question, I just wanted to insert. We recently had a presentation from federal law enforcement person. They are obviously monitoring crypto transactions. There's software, and since everything is engraved in the blockchain, you can, in the case of Bitcoin, you can track those coins, and you can say these coins came from North Korea, and there's a high likelihood that there have been these are proceeds from an extortion or so scam. So there's software that analyzes people's wallets when you try to go to an exchange and sell your Bitcoin, and they're giving your wallet a score, and if your score is above a certain threshold, your wallet will be flagged, and the exchange might refuse to do business with your wallet. Same for maybe coins that come from a mixer like Tornado or so. In Europe, as I understand it, CBDC, there are, of course, there are a lot of groups that are pushing for anonymity and less intrusion from the government. I think the possible compromise could be that neither central bank nor the commercial bank should be able to see who is sending transactions, nor the amounts, but that if there's a judge, those things can be revealed in case there's suspicion of unlawful activity. But it's not the fight is still ongoing between privacy and law enforcement.
Yeah, I would add a note to Shimon's question regarding the kind of the legacy companies and the TradFi receptiveness to innovation. So, meaning I'm a former banker, so I tend to be quite sympathetic to the challenges that banks face. So I would say there is no like exact answer to what is preventing or who is preventing things to move faster. One thing I can say for sure is that regulations were not helping or are still not helping. If you think about Canada and the US, most of the banks, and usually the banks that want to innovate first are the small and medium banks. If those banks risk touching a stable coin under a situation where the OCC or OSFI in Canada or FDIC or FGIC give them any sort of reprisal because of that, they might just go out of business. So the stakes are very high for any bank that is trying to innovate to do anything if there's no clear space for them to do it. I think now the US is making it clear to some staff notes that both the SEC and the CFTC and the OCC are giving more leeway to the banks. But of course, I think banks would benefit to, for example, hire more people that come from the crypto space or come from development and try to learn and challenge their own assumptions on that side, right? So sandboxes, I think, despite they are a bit annoying, it's always POC, MVP, whatever, but lets banks kind of test the reaction of regulators to what they're building. On the consultation side, meaning we're 180 people at this point, so not a major corporation. We've been very welcome to consultations to our size. So ECB, ESMA in the US. So I don't know how restrictive it is to small companies to participate on public consultations. It takes a lot of time. So I don't know if startups actually have the cash and the time to devote building actual relevant documentations to those public consultations. But it doesn't seem to me to be a boys club or a golf club behavior where only the big ones are deciding stuff. I think what happened is that the banks actually hold the last mile, and if they don't adopt, then there's just no practical ways for this to scale. And then it's where I think regulation and maybe a little bit of profile, a professional like team profile update on the banks is also welcome.
That's exactly you touched the point of this controversy being raised, but not exactly being real. Like companies like you represent are included in those consultations. I want to extrapolate also like those objections from community, like how to address it, as we want to have stablecoin, but we also don't want to governments to have control over it. Your answer gives me some pointers where to look for. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's time to wrap up. Like hope like all your questions have been answered by Rob and Alex. You can connect with them through LinkedIn or like email. I think it has been shared on the chat. Like if you want to connect with them and if you have any further questions. Yeah. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, hope like we'll have like a sequel in this one next time. Like for other deep dive on this. Yeah, thank you again, Alex, Rob, and everyone for joining us. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.